Hello and welcome to Elvenhome. A week later than I originally intended, but I realised that if I kept to the original schedule, I'd have been busy making a video over Christmas, and I'm not sure that would have been very popular. So I delayed it a week, which has given me the opportunity to do this just before the festivities commence in earnest. So let me take you to where I had got to in building and completing the final section of the layout. At the end of the last video, I had completed by that point installing Maggot's Folly, and although you only saw it at distance, I think I had also started to put the plaster bandage on. I hadn't, I think, at that point fully painted up the additional piece that goes in here. This is the piece that can be removed, and it still can be removed. This is fixed and obviously goes into the where the plaster cloth was. This is a fat thumb hole, but that's going to have a bush stuck into it. I hadn't realised I'd cut it quite so thin. I had to cut out a bit at the back to get it to fit over the covering for the tunnel entrances. And as I was busy creating the front of the rock face, I stuck my thumb through it. But that matters not, because the nature will provide the answer. I put the plaster on top of the plaster cloth, and that took really quite several days to dry, not surprisingly. Even in the flat, it was generally cooler. It took a long time for that to fully dry. And then lurgy struck, and so I've not done very much on the layout. Actually, before yesterday evening I got back to it, and I'm recording this now on Monday. So this morning I have put on 2 coats of the paint. No, yesterday evening I put on the yellow ochre. This morning I have put on the burnt umber, and I'm just letting that dry. So there'll now be a grey wash going over that. Yes, a grey wash, and then a black wash finally. And then I will blend in some parts of it more with the colours that are on the top. And around the base here, if I pull this back just briefly, I've got to blend obviously this into the colour that I've used there, which should be fairly straightforward to do. One of the useful things whilst I was laid low with lurgy was that it gave time for the power distribution board to arrive. So again, yesterday evening, in celebration of not feeling quite so grotty, I decided to crawl around under the layout where there was a lot of dust. This may not have been one of the brightest things that I'd ever thought to do, but nonetheless, the power distribution board is wired in, and the wires from Maggot's Folly are now in that distribution board, and that board will be used to power any lights or more lighting that I put down into the canal area that's not using the Just Light system. All the lights on these buildings are powered by a Just Plug system from Woodland Scenics, and indeed so are the lights here. They were always designed to be powered in that way. So the ones on these buildings are not, and there's a power distribution board under here that controls those. But I've got to make up my mind what lighting's going to go in. So the next stage is to complete the next 2 pieces of paint to get that over with. And I will come back once I've completed that, before I start work on the any scenic work around this area. The only other thing to report that I've done is that in front of Sharky's End and up to the set of points where the line separates, I've put in and filled a gap that was there where there was some missing caulk, and that has been painted prior to me doing that single stretch. What is it, 11-12 inches of ballasting, which I will do probably tomorrow, and leave that for a couple of days to dry before we give the track a damn good clean up there. There's had very little traffic over it. It'll be absolutely filthy. I'll be surprised if much moves over it. But I mean, things have moved. It's not too bad, but it's been a while since anything traversed those metals. So I'll get on with this and come back once I've got a bit more to show you. You may be wondering why I'm showing you a single section of unballasted track. That is because until yesterday, no, the day before yesterday evening, it was not unballasted track, it was ballasted track. I'd completed the ballasting of this section, and I decided therefore to run a train out of High Elven and to run it onto the branch, only to discover that once it got onto this section of track, there are three pieces of track, one on the bridge, the little one that's unballasted at the moment, and a short section that then links up to the point. And I did that because I didn't have a single length of FlexiTrack left. And rather than going and buying a single piece of FlexiTrack, I made use of the bits that I had knocking around. That caused me the problem that I'm going to describe to you, but also, I'm pleased to say, came to my aid. And I discovered two problems. The first was that the section of track that runs across the bridge up to the point of that ballasted track had no power. It did have power before I ballasted because I ran a train over to check that everything worked. But in the process of putting in the sleepers underneath the gap that you can see there, I'd managed to move one of the fish plates so it was no longer making a connection. I'd also managed at the other end, where it connects to that short piece, I don't know what I did, but I'd managed to force one of the far track on the right hand side up into the air. But I hadn't noticed any of that. I hadn't run a train along or run my fingers along. I'd just been so pleased to complete that bit of ballasting that I put all the ballast in using ballast magic, wetted it, went away, came back the next day very pleased with myself that all the ballasting was done, until I tried to run a train. So my first problem was that there was no power on the bit of track on the left. My second problem was that when the train tried to move across from the unballasted section to the bit to its right, it immediately derailed because it was virtually, the track was about 1.5–2 millimeters up in the air. I mean, it just was horrendous. And I tried everything I could think of to try and put it right without taking the ballast up, but the only answer was indeed to remove the ballast and then extract that central piece of track, which I managed to do without actually destroying it or having to cut it in any way. And then I just took a few more of the ties off that central piece, slipped on some joiners so they were completely in, and then I could put that piece of track back in, which fits exactly the gap, and then slide the joiners over. And there is now a piece of track with continuous running, and I've run trains over it and checked that everything's fine. And my next trick, I've got to repair the bushes that have disappeared under Sharky's End station because they all came out with the ballast as I removed it, and then reballast that section. The only problem is that the ballast I used up here I'd saved, because it's a kind of ballast that I got when I first did the layout, and it's a different color to everything else. But I think what I'll do is I'll make a point of that as a brand new ballast, as though a new section has had to go in, and also as a reminder to me of the basics: ensure electrical continuity and ensure that all rail joins are flat. But there you go, not everything goes as you wish. I'll come back in a minute, well, on this video, after I put the ballast in and got it fixed down, and show you what else I managed to achieve before I discovered my error. So with a little J50 traversing the area of badly ballasted track, which is now, as you can see, working and finished. You can also now see for the first time the completed work of blending in High Elven to the canal basin below. It was quite a moment for me actually when I completed this section. While I was working on it, the central section that sits about there, I'd taken out because I didn't want it to get messed up and coloured with plaster. So once I slotted it back in and stood back, and there it was, done. There's all the major structural work on this layout completed. And I really had to stand and just look at it for a while because it was really quite something to reach this point. One of the things when I'd finished blending in that I had to do was that at the bit on the right here, along the canal basin about there, that you may remember I painted brown when I first did that bit of the hillside, and that was a mistake because there was no way I was going to blend that brown into the colours that I've now chosen for the rockery and stuff around there. So the only answer was to paint it white and then blend it in the same way. The only thing I encountered, which may be worth others being aware of, is that I had some Vallejo Artists white, which is what I used. I watered it down because it's very thick, but it was very white, and it took a lot more coats of the washes to get it to accept the colour and to dull down. But I'm happy where it's got to because it's going to have scenic stuff applied to it in various ways, and it's sufficiently similar to everything else now. But it really was quite vibrant, the white, and it took quite a bit of taking down. I don't know if you can quite see. I'll take a better picture. Yes, you won't be able to see it from here. I found at the bottom of a box 5 of the Just Plug nano lights, which I'd used for the houses along High Street here. And so I decided to fit them into, in particular, the shops. I'll do a run along the shops now. And with the shops, I had to create a box to fit into the back of the shops because there's no back to them, to stop light bleed. But I'm so pleased I've lit the shops and put more lights in the houses. It's just completely brought it to life. I mean, it came to life when I put some lights in anyway, but putting those extra 5 lights in made a huge difference to the overall effect, which really does just reinforce that the more lights the merrier, because it really makes a difference to a layout. I've started work on the canal at this end to enable me to put this back on, because my jumper was just ripping lumps out of the foliage here. And I've put just basically a box section over the bit that was here and put some of the cobbles on top of there. I fitted some cobbles there ahead of putting in some other scenic materials. This bridge, I'm going to have it that the bridge is no longer accessible because a bit further along the towpath here, there's some the canal pathway was damaged during the war, and I haven't got round yet to fixing it. So the bridge is blocked off, and that means that this is all overgrown here, so you can't see the path as it turns around the corner. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. The canal itself, well, obviously the main thing will be actually putting some water in, and I'm going to do, I think I'm going to do a bigger test piece of using the PVA and seeing how that turns out. I'm sure the PVA will work. On the test piece I did before, one of the things I'd seen was putting matte varnish over the top of it at the end. And when I did that on the test piece I'd done before, I had a very strange effect at the end. But I think I was using some very old varnish, so I'm going to give it another go with some newer varnish that I've got. I'm indebted to Mark McGow for the suggestion and the noticing that my lock gates have no means of opening the paddles to allow the water to move into or out from the central basin. That I'm indebted. What I'm not indebted is trying to work out how to build them to scale. I think I know how I'm going to do it, and I may have a fiddle with that in time for when you next come back. It'll only be a representation because I can't, the cogs and gears and bits I won't be able to do, but we will be able to do something that approximates to what you would find on lock gates to enable you to open the sluices to allow the water to move. So that's where I've got to so far. I will start work now, I think, on doing some of the scenic work. And I think we'll probably go to a running session at this point because it's about time you saw trains entering and leaving the stations, and in particular going under the High Elven. I'm really pleased. Bit of track cleaning for me before I do that, because I would like to run a service which has not run for quite a long while from Weathertop all stations to High Elven, and that would be jolly good. So after the running session, we'll come back and see how far I've got with any scenic work before we finish up with this video. Well, despite my best endeavours, I didn't actually get around to doing very much more on the layout after the section that I recorded a few days ago. Real life got in the way one way or another. So the shots that you're seeing now, or you'll see a bit more of, and the running session really was the culmination of the work on the layout, probably for this year, because I think what I'm going to do is give myself a bit of a break over the Christmas and New Year period. I'm just really pleased with how everything has come out. And as I said a bit earlier in this video, when I put the middle section in and all the white foam had gone and I stood back, I thought, goodness, it's very surprising. It was quite a profound moment. But I do really enjoy now just watching the trains go by, as you're seeing in the inset in this section. So that really completes Elvenhome. One thing I will do now, though, is just to give you a comparison. In February, I took a shot from the end of the layout, which I used as my desktop for a while, and I took a more recent shot. So what I'll do is, whilst I'm talking now, I will put up the shots of February and then December, and you really can see how much has been achieved. And as I've said, I think in earlier videos, it's really helpful to do that, because you always wonder how much you're actually achieving. We all, I think, achieve much more than we realise. But with that, that really does bring Elvenhome to an end for this year, and gives me the opportunity to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And hopefully I'll see some of you at various shows that I'm planning to go to. I'm due at Model Rail Scotland in February, and I'm going to be going to the Monday of the York show, which I think is April, end of March, beginning of April. And then Whalley, of course, will be again for me, which is something of a fixture. I really enjoyed that show. But thank you very much for your company this year, and for all the new subscribers and those who've stuck with me. For all your comments. I mean, this layout, the whole end of that layout is all through comments that I've received from people, and I'm eternally grateful to you all for the time you give in giving your comments, and I'm more than happy to respond to them. So please do let me have your comments. And if you've liked the video, well, give it a thumbs up, because that really helps. And if you haven't subscribed, well, please do. It's free. And hit the bell notification so you know when I put up videos. But I think what I'll do is I'll just leave you with pictures of the trains running around Elvenhome, which structurally now is complete. Slange.